Good morning, everyone. So again, we're doing Yehi Kevod, which is in Sukkot de Zimra, just before Ashrei. So please have a siddur. So please, we're continuing. We did the beginning of this collection of psukim. This is sort of lahavdil, sort of like a collection of Tehillim hits that was put together sometime in the 6th, 7th century, sometime after the close of the Talmud, around 500, 550 of the Common Era, and but before Masechet Sofrim was written, and that's probably sometime in the 6th or 7th century, because it's already mentioned there. So it's sometime in that time period, this collection of psukim was put together, and it begins with the pasuk Yehi Kevod Hashem li'olam yismach Hashem b'ma'asav. And we talked about this last week, but I just want to review the one idea that there is a Gemara in Chulin that says that Sar Ha'olam, that the Malach, the angel appointed by God to be over this world, this physical realm, every morning announces that Yehi Kevod, may the glory of Hashem be over all of creation. So that's the beginning of this paragraph, and we did the next couple of psukim that talk about, and the first half of this collection talks about Hashem as the creator, and then Hashem as the ruler. So the first half of this paragraph is talking about Hashem created, and Hashem continues to rule. And I want to pick up at the pasuk, Hashem Shimcha La'olam, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is your name forever. So in other words, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei always was and always will be the true name of Hashem. And of course, Yud Kei Vav Kei, there are many commentaries, but the most popular position over what the word Yud Kei Vav Kei means is that it's a working of the verb to be. And it means that Hashem always was and always will be. When translating Yud Kei Vav Kei, a lot of books don't translate it. I mean, Archscroll in front of me translates it, doesn't translate, just says Hashem, the name. It's often called the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter name. But I think if you're pushed to give a translation for the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, I think eternal works best. It means that the being, the power which always was and always will be, and that name just means always. And then it says, Hashem zichracha l'dor v'dor. So not only in theory was the name of Hashem always Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei, but that's the name that we use to mention, to remember. The translation I have in front of me from Archscroll is your memorial, your mention, your remembering from generation to generation. So in other words, we're able to use the name Yud Kei Vav Kei because it gets passed along from generation to generation. So the name is theoretically always in place, but on the practical level of our davening, we use it because the previous generations used it, and we are passing it along to the future generations. This pasuk, which is which is the fifth verse in Yehi Kevod, is sort of like Dor L'Dor Yeshabach Ma'asecha, the Daled verse in Ashrei, that we only know how to praise Hashem. And in this case, we only know God's name because it got passed down. In other words, the Avot gave it, to the Jews, and then from generation to generation, we continue to use the name, and it therefore continues. So the real essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is eternal existence. That's the essence of that pasuk. And now we say, Hashem b'shamayim hechin kis'o. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, established a kisei, a divine throne, a place from which God's power and rulership emanates, and that is in another realm that we call Shamayim, which is not directly available to us. Whenever we start talking about the different realms of existence, you're really accessing Kabbalah, and it's really a bit beyond me. But what we say, and this is going to come up later in our collection of verses, we believe that the best way of accessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who has his headquarters, if you will, his kisei, his throne in heaven, is through Yerushalayim. That we really believe that Yerushalayim is the access point between Olam Hazeh, our physical realm, and Shamayim, that spiritual realm. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu has established a headquarters, or however you want to say it, that's in Shamayim. However, the second half of this pasuk, umalchuto. However, his rulership is b'chol mashallah. However, his rulership is over every place. Every place, Hashem is the Moshel. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't always accessible to us in this realm. Nevertheless, don't make the mistake for a second of thinking that Hashem's rulership isn't present with us in this realm, because it is. Hashem may not always be as available as we would like, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is indeed the ruler and is in control of what happens in this realm. So this is getting to the end of the first part of this collection of verses, and the next verse, next two sentences ends the beginning part, and these two next verses don't appear in Psalms. Most of our paragraph are verses from Psalms. The next verse comes from Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles, probably the least known of books in Tanakh, probably, which it's because a lot of it is lists. So it ends up, unless you're really into it, it can sound very boring. But there are some beautiful narratives in it, and this is part of one of the beautiful psukim that's in Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles, probably compiled by Ezra, though there are other opinions. And this pasuk introduces the great chidush of whoever wrote Yehi Kevod, the anonymous poet who put together this collection. And so let's first do this verse, and then let's get into that next sentence. Yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz. This is a very powerful concept. This concept is very powerful, and a lot of Mekubalim point out that the power of this introduction to the verse partially comes from the fact that the Roshei Tevot of those four words is Yud Kei Vav Kei. So in other words, it's not only the message about Hashem and how Hashem permeates heaven and earth, but it's also accessing the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. So the question comes up, what's the difference between simcha, which is joy, which is happening in heaven, and Gila? Gila also means joy. In front of me, I have the heavens will be glad and the earth will rejoice. But I mean, we don't know what words to use for them, for the differences between them. But I'll explain how the Malbim touches up in a second. But the heavens are happy and earth is happy because of the rulership of Hashem. The heavens are happy and earth is happy because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our king. Okay, so the Malbim says that the term simcha means joy that is relatively spontaneous for something new which happened. And Gila is a continued sense of appreciation and happiness, gladness over something that has been continuing over a while. And so he then goes on to explain why simcha is used vis-a-vis heaven and Gila is used vis-a-vis this world. Because we say in Kohelet, Ein Chadash Tachat HaShemesh. There's nothing new under the sun. So only above the sun in heaven can there really be true simcha, gladness over something which is new, because new things only happen in that realm. While down here we have joy. There is some gladness down here, but that's over the continuing existence. And when you think about it, one of the things that makes us happy often is this sense of joy that we get from continuity. Part of what's going on these days, because of COVID and the pandemic and all of this, is that we don't like the fact that we've lost shigra, we've lost normalcy, we've lost regularity. And so Gila, the joy down here, tends to come from continuity. But in heaven, where Hashem's power is manifest all the time, they're very happy with new things because they know anything that's new in heaven comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Down here, anything that upsets the normal flow of things doesn't make us happy because we're not sure how to deal with it and we don't know the source of it. It may come from a negative place as well. So the Gila, the joy in this world, tends to come from continuity, from the reality fulfilling our expectations. When we wake up to things that we weren't expecting and we don't know how to deal with, that does not bring us joy. And then comes the end of this pasuk, which is perhaps the real reason why our anonymous poet chose this pasuk to put it here. V'yomru b'goyim, and it said amongst all the nations, Hashem malach. God has ruled. God has and continues to rule. And that's where the Gila of this world comes from. Because what is it that gives this world the sense of continuity? The rulership of Hashem. The sense that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge, that's what gives us our Gila more than anything else. That, a nice piece of herring. But those are the things that give us our great joy, right? I think Jews get joy from food. But anyways, the real source of joy is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control, and the sense of the continuity of our existence through the rulership and through the control of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, and that introduces the one sentence in our poem, which is not a pasuk. And I have to say, in Jewish tradition, this is far and away the most famous non-pasuk that we have. Actually, Reb Meir Bar Ilan, the son of the Netziv, and of course the great scholar, great Talmid Chacham, that Bar Ilan University was named for. Reb Meir Bar Ilan referred to this sentence as a pasuk malachuti, from the word work. It's an artificial verse. It's a verse, but it's an artificial verse. And there are other Meforshim that try to say that it's really taking pieces from other verses, because all three of the phrases do appear in Psukim throughout Tanakh. But nevertheless, this has become a very powerful statement. And if you daven either Nusach Sfard, we had a new participant in last week's class that wrote me a beautiful email about how much he enjoys davening in Nusach Edot Mizrach, where they pronounce this pasuk very strongly just before Baruch She'amah, and they'll say it twice responsively together with the Chazan. And it's also in Nusach Sfard. And sometimes when I go to a Sfard Minyan, I love standing up and just pronouncing Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch, La'olam Ve'ed. And this particular artificial verse figures prominently in the piyutim, in the liturgical poems that are part of the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening. And it's just a beautiful expression of our true faith and belief and assurance that the security that we have from the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu always was, is, and always will be. And the most famous way to explain the verse is Hashem Malach, Hashem ruled even before there was a universe. When there was nothing else in existence, there was HaKadosh Baruch Hu in charge. Hashem Melech. Not only that, but since Hashem has created our universe, Hashem continues to be the ruler of this realm. But Hashem Yimloch, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will rule when we get to Olam Haba, when we get to either the other realm or the after realm, or whatever's going to follow this particular existence that we're in right now. We believe that whatever happens then, HaKadosh Baruch Hu there too is the sole being in control. And that's very powerful. And of course, it ends with Hashem Yimloch La'olam Ve'ed, and La'olam Ve'ed. I just want to remind you, in the name of Rabbi Sachs Oliver Shalom, who used to say, whenever you see La'olam Ve'ed, it means infinity, both in space and in time. It's both spatial and temporal. So at the end, we're saying Hashem will always rule, both everywhere and every when. And I think that's we know it's an extremely powerful statement, and that's why we love it so much, and why it's become an important part of our liturgy, of our davening on a daily basis, but especially on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where this pasuk features prominently in Edot Mizrach. It's also in the Slichot, a little less so by us. We also say it, of course, in many Nuschaot before we take out the Sefer Torah on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So we use this sentence, this artificial pasuk, this artificial verse, many times, because it's very moving on one hand, and on the other hand, it's very reassuring. And that brings us to the second half of our poem, of our collection of anthology, if you will, of Psukim, which is changing a little bit our emphasis, our focus The beginning, God created and continues to rule, but now you're going to see we're moving into another thought. And it says, Hashem melech olam va'ed. Hashem rules olam va'ed, everywhere and every when, okay? Avdu goyim me artso. What does that mean? Even when the nations shall have perished, is the translation in front of me. In other words, even when those people who don't believe in Hashem, and in the footnote in front of me, it says that it only means, and based on the verses, of course, in Yeshayahu and Zechariah, especially Zechariah, we know that many non-Jews will continue to exist in Yemot HaMashiach, but only those who have accepted a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So in other words, Hashem's rulership is there now and will be there in that time period when those who haven't believed in a Kadosh Baruch Hu no longer are around us. And this gets us into sort of part 3. It's the beginning of the second half of the poem, but it's like part 3, which is beginning part, God created. Number 2, God rules. Number 3, the rulership of Hashem ultimately doesn't allow any ideas which try to upset the rulership of Hashem. So even though it seems many times in history that the bad guys are in the ascendant, that's a temporary blip on the screen. Because the reality is that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to outlive any human attempt to undermine the rulership of Hashem. So to whom do you attribute the verse? Oh, okay. Thank you, Simon. I don't know. I mean, it was some anonymous, I'm a rabbi. I hate to say I don't know. I don't know. We don't know who put I have, in all of my looking around in the last couple of weeks, I've seen many attempts to pinpoint the time when this verse and this paragraph were put together, but I have seen no attempts to put a name on it. I mean, they seem to be pretty sure that it happened sometime in the 600s of the Common Era. That seems to be the most common position. Nevertheless, I haven't seen any attempt to try to say who said it. Although I saw one study that seemed pretty confident that the person who invented this pasuk lived in Bavel, not in Eretz Yisrael. And apparently it took longer for this verse to be used popularly in Eretz Yisrael than it did in Bavel. It became more popular there for a while. But the famous Midrash, post-Talmudic Midrash about that pasuk says that every morning there's an angel that gets up and says this pasuk. And so it's very nice in the Sephardic rites where they have the chazan say it and we respond. So we feel like we're responding every morning to the malach who's announcing that pasuk, and we're echoing it. It's very, very beautiful. But even in Nusach Ashkenaz, we do it responsively on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But during the week, we just say it in Nusach Ashkenaz. Okay. Now the next two psukim, one from Psalms and one from, we're going to see from Mishlei, from Book of Proverbs, is following up on this idea of the power of Hashem, to be in charge, number one. But more importantly, in these two psukim, number two is that anybody who wants to try to disagree with Hashem, they're not going anywhere. And it says, Hashem heter atzat goyim. God nullifies these ideas of these alien peoples that try to come up with idolatry or an ideology that doesn't believe in the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, doesn't believe in Hashem, Hashem ultimately nullifies, annuls those positions, Heini machshavot amim, and places aside the thoughts of such people. So in other words, over time, and we know this is true, over time, there have been a tremendous number of conflicting ideologies and theologies that don't seem to recognize the rulership of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Whether it was idolatry at one point, or other, well, today there's there's all sorts of atheism and whatever, or other philosophic ideas that throughout history there are all sorts of times and places where there were alternative ideas. They all fall by the wayside, while our belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately will prevail. But what's important in this pasuk is the two terms. What's the difference between an eitzah and a machshava? And both the Malbim and the Vilna Gaon talk about this, the issue of those two terms. But I'm going to actually wait for the next pasuk. So I want to read the next pasuk, and then I want to talk about the difference between what's an eitzah and what's a machshava. And here we have Rabbi. I love this pasuk because when I was becoming religious in the 60s, there was one from the rabbi's sons that was this pasuk, and I remember the Rabbi machshava b'levish. It's a really nice, very nice song that I can't do justice to, but you can probably find it on YouTube if you wanted to try later. But I always love this pasuk, and it's again one of the two psukim in our poem that is not from Psalms. This is from Mishlei. Rabot machshavot belevish. There are a lot of thoughts in the hearts of man that who knows what thoughts beat in the heart of man. Okay. Va'atzat Hashem hitakum. But ultimately, it is the eitzah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which does prevail. That throughout history there are a lot of anti-Jewish ideas, and they're gone. Takes a while, but we get rid of them. But we prevail. We continue. We're lahavdil. We're Old Man River. We just keep rolling along. But all the other stuff, I don't care what it was. Egypt, Greece, whatever. It doesn't make a difference. We just keep on going, and that's the idea that's very important in this pasuk and in this part of the poem, that it is the idea of Hashem, which is ultimately the unifying idea for all humanity. But what's the difference between an eitzah and a machshava? And so both, they say it in different ways, but both the Malbim and the Vilna Gaon agree an eitzah is an immutable plan. That's the big picture. If we were talking like military people, I served in the IDF, but I'm not much of a military person. People would, when they saw me in uniform, usually giggled. But anyways, but if we're thinking in terms of military stuff, it would be that eitzah is like the strategy, the big picture. Machshava, those are tactics, and those tend to be flexible. Okay, so in other words, when we're living in a certain, epoch of Jewish history, it seems like God's big picture might have fallen by the wayside. God forbid. But that's only because we're involved in you're living in the middle of the Holocaust or the Khmelnytsky uprisings or the Bar Kokhba rebellion, and things are going really, really bad, right? You might think, oh, the big picture. No. It's just because there's a machshava, there's a tactic going on that we don't understand, and how eventually it's going to get to the. Oh wow! My son Yaakov just put up on chat. Thank you, Yaakov. So there's, again, eitzah, big picture. Machshava is the tactic that's going on at this moment, which sometimes you can't see as part of the big picture. Lahavdil, in a battle, in a war, just because these terms work on the military level, what happens is, you tell a certain unit to go to a place that isn't the ultimate goal. They say, wait, but don't we have to get over there? Why are you sending me over here? And so the answer is, to get to the major eventual goal, sometimes you have to take detours. And the detour is often a machshava. So what we're saying in our pasuk is, Rabot machshavot beladish. Humans tend to have a lot of, these tactical ideas. Oh, let's try this. Isn't that a nice idea? Maybe we can run a country this way, or maybe this philosophy is best, right? We got a lot of these ideas going on all the time. However, Vatzat Hashem itakum. But eventually you're going to see when all the dust settles, you're going to see, we're back to Yud Kevod is in charge. And that's what Shlomo HaMelech said in Mishlei, and that's what we're saying here in this part of the poem, that humanity's ideas are by their nature temporary. Okay, and they're not going to be necessarily part of the ultimate plan. And then this idea, back to Tehillim, this idea gets emphasized. Atzat Hashem la'olam ta'amod. That in the big picture of Hashem is going to eventually forever ta'amod, be established, stand up, and be seen as the winner. But not only that, even machshavat libo l'dor v'dor, even in the small items, when things look bleak, sometimes those bad times are part of the ultimate plan. There's the famous metaphor, of a jigsaw puzzle. And sometimes you're holding up a very dark piece, and you say, "Oh, whoa, this is terrible. What kind of terrible situation is this little piece describing?" But then when you put it into the big picture, you see, wow, it's part of the beauty of the entire thing. I mean, this is easy for me to say, but for someone living through one of those dark times, it's terrible and disastrous. But we do believe that even in the micro, God's divine will is somehow playing out in ways I don't understand and would make no attempt to try to explain. But nevertheless, what we're saying in this third part of our poem of collected concepts drawn from Tehillim, basically, we're saying, don't worry. Even if in the micro things look dismal, in the macro it's all part of God's plan. It's going to be fine. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always, pulling the strings. The machinations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are always at work, even when things look very bad right now. Have the faith to hold on, hopefully. You can, personally, because not everybody makes it through all of the disasters, but hold on as best you can with the faith that the big picture will become clear at some point. And now, Kihu Ama Yehi, that Hashem stated. Now, this is a reference, of course, to the 6 days of Bereshit. That in the 6 days of Bereshit, HaKadosh Baruch Hu basically 10 times said, and God said, let there be X, right? We have 9 of them in the first parak of Bereshit, and we believe that Bereshit bara is the 10th. Usually that's how we count to get 10. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended for something, and that's what happened. Vayi hu tziva God made a command on something, v'ya'amod, and it became established. That a Kadosh Baruch Hu brought into creation just through the mere thought, and things became permanent through HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanding it. The Ramban is famous for having said that in the first parak of Breshit, whenever HaKadosh Baruch Hu used the words ki tov, that something was good, those were the parts of Briah which remained permanent. That's why, like on the second day, there's no ki tov, because there HaKadosh Baruch Hu was like arranging things, but they weren't yet, nothing was yet in its final format. So the words ki tov don't appear. The only time that we have ki tov, that's when the things are sivan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded something, and those are the things which are eternal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu just says something, poof, it happens. But the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to become more permanent, which are described as ki tov, those things are more HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded, as opposed to just mentioned. So those things are forever. Now, hidden in this idea is another beautiful concept, which means not only on the physical level are the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said always going to be with us or come into fruition, but when Hashem commands something, that includes Torah. So the Torah and mitzvot are permanent, is what we're saying at the end of this. Hutziva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands something, whether we're talking about Torah in general or mitzvot specifically, those things are always going to exist. And even if for a temporary amount of time you can't do it, for example, we're told a lot of mitzvot have to do with the Beit HaMikdash, and we can't do them right now. That doesn't mean that they're not existing in theory right now, and in the future will exist in reality. We hope very soon. So this pasuk is again emphasizing this third part of the poem. And the third part of the poem is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the decider of what ultimately happens. Okay, we're going to enter the fourth part of the poem in a second, but just review. Okay, there's four parts. Part number one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created everything. Part number two, HaKadosh Baruch Hu remained the ruler over everything. Part number three, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plans, thoughts, strategies, tactics are the reality in which we live, and they are the things which continue to persist throughout history, even if they seem temporarily like they're not in control. Now we come to part four. Okay. And part four, by the way, it shouldn't come as a surprise that there are four parts to our poem, since our poem is very much based on the four-letter name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Okay, so since it's based on the name of Hashem, so there are four parts. And here's the fourth part. Ki vacha Hashem b'Tzion. The fourth part of the poem is HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael. So the fourth concept in our collection of verses is the chosenness of the Jewish people. And we express this idea by first mentioning Tzion, Eretz Yisrael. Now, Tzion is one of those terms that has changed its meaning over history. Tzion originally seemed to have meant a specific location in Yerushalayim, probably a fortress or castle, palace in the original city of Ir David and Yebus, the previous city of Jerusalem. After a while, the term Tzion came to mean all of Yerushalayim. And then when the Jews returned from Bavel, and we had, under Ezra and Nehemiah, in the basically the 5th century BCE, the term Zion described all of the resettled area where the Jews from Bavel were living, and it was much smaller country at the time. It was Yerushalayim, north to about Beit El, and south to Hebron, even though it mentions that there were Jews all the way in Beersheba, but it was basically Yehuda and Binyamin from the original size of Eretz Yisrael. So that's Zion. Iva lemoshav lo. God desired it, lemoshav lo, for his dwelling place. And of course, here Zion can mean just Yerushalayim or just a specific spot in Yerushalayim, meaning Har HaBayit, okay? But it's a lot of Hasidic commentaries point out this word Iva. Iva is from the word ta'ava, which means a desire or an appetite or a lust. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu really wants this. It's a powerful term, much stronger than rotzeh. However, a lot of the Hasidic commentaries on this term say Aleph Vav Hey was used here to mean the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because those 3 letters are missing in a famous pasuk that we read not yesterday but last week. When we talk about Yoshua's battle against Amalek, at the end of it, it says ki yad al kes ka, that the battle against Amalek is going to be forever, because Amalek has his hand against the throne case ka of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Case, we're missing the aleph, kisei. Ka, yud hey, we're missing the vav hey. So in other words, while the battle against the forces of evil, which we call Amalek, which is both a specific group of people, but is also a concept of denigrating and combating Hashem. When they are in the ascendant, when they're fighting Hashem, we're missing the aleph from Kisei and the vav K from the 4-letter name of God. So it's case Ka. So our pasuk says, but you know what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is putting back those letters, aleph, vav, hey, iva, by establishing the divine presence over there, for Baruch Hashem, about a mile from where I'm sitting right now. That when that happens, the aleph, vav, and hey, they're going to be back. And then the pasuk is going to say, ki yad al kisei yud ke vav ke. And that's why in our verse, the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, remember, the history of God in Israel is a love affair. The desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for living in Yerushalayim and being amongst the Jews is the ultimate reality of Olam Hazeh. So that's what Kivacha Hashem B'Tzion, Iva L'Moshav Lo, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants this. And when the Beit HaMikdash is back in its place and the bad guys have been defeated and have disappeared and dissipated from the face of the earth, and all that's left are Jews and Gentiles who support us and agree with us and understand, and they become Bnei Noach, they become righteous Chasidei Umot Ha'olam. Under those circumstances, then we have re-achieved the unity that we want in the world. Now I'm starting to run out of time. I'm going to go a little bit further. Ki Yaakov b'chalo ka Yisrael l'sgulato. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Yaakov. Really? chose Yaakov? That's first of all, that's fascinating because didn't he really choose Abraham? The original choosing seems to have been Abraham, and then it says Yisrael becomes God's segula. If anyone wants to send me their email address, I would gladly send them my my weekly Devat Torah, which also appears as a blog on Times of Israel, but and on website Philo Torah. If you want to, you can check there. But I talked about this concept of segula, and sort of for people that like Tolkien, segula really means precious, my precious, like like Gollum, something that is just so important to me. So why are we using Yaakov and not Abraham? Because Yaakov is representative of a special reality of the Jewish nation. And that special reality of the Jewish nation is we have a dual existence. I led two lives. That's true of the Jewish nation. We are Yaakov, which is very much related to this world. Remember, the name Yaakov comes from Akev, which is the bottom of our foot. We are very much attached to this world. And my physical nature still loves God and was chosen by God. My physicality is totally dedicated to Hashem. But not only that, Yisrael, and Yisrael, people say, is talking about the letters, if you turn around, Li Rosh, I have a head, okay? So the top of my head, my neshama, my spirituality, the part of me that reaches for the stars and for the spiritual beyond this physical realm, that also is connected to Hashem. I mean, that's less of a chiddush than my physical nature, but that's why this pasuk was chosen, and that's why David HaMelech in the original psalm was using this name. Okay, Yaakov just put my thank God for my son Yaakov. He's my second IT guy for the share. So the article where I talk about my precious is now available in the chat, so you can click on it and get the article if you or you can send me your email and I'll send them out. Okay, but anyway, so we're seeing that both aspects, and that's why we're talking about Yaakov, because Yaakov, more than Avram and Yitzchak, clearly demonstrated the two aspects of his personality, of his both physical and spiritual reality. And both parts of who I am are totally dedicated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it's the Yisrael part that's the true segula, the true treasure of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the last three psukim, which I think we're going to leave for next week, continues this concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us and is always going to be with us. And then this concept that's continued with a pasuk from the Psalm for Thursday, and also a very nice song. Kilo yitosh Hashem. Okay, Kilo yitosh Hashem amov nachlato lo yazov. And with this, we'll end. That not only did HaKadosh Baruch Hu choose us and loves us, and He loves us both our physical self and our spiritual self. He loves us from the top of our heads to the bottom, to the soles of our feet. But there's also the promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will never forsake us. Ki lo yitosh. Even though sometimes things look dull and things look dim, nevertheless, we have to have the faith that we are never going to be abandoned. Now, this pasuk doesn't fit in so beautifully because it begins with ki, which usually translates in modern Hebrew, when you say ki, you mean because. In biblical Hebrew, you usually mean that. So it's like a continuation of idea. And in the Psalm for Thursday, when we say this, we're really saying it looks bad, But we should have hope because Ki lo yitosh, that Hashem never forsakes us. And so this is a powerful continuation of the thought that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose us, and that choice is permanent and will never be revoked. And that is a very, very powerful idea. And we'll just end with two psukim that we think of as coming together, even though they're in disparate parts of Sefer Tehillim. These two psukim are also the introduction to Ma'ariv, and so we're going to Arvit, and so we're going to talk about those two psukim next week, which ends this poem, but also introduces davening. There's these last two verses. It's like get us into the tefillah mode, and which is why they end this poem, this artificial psalm, if you will, and the introduction to Ma'ariv. And we'll talk about them. But next week, I just want to say, please have a Sefer Tehillim too. Have a Siddur for these two psukim, and then have a Sefer Tehillim, because we're going to do the psalm for Purim according to the Nusach of the Vilna Gaon. There's a special psalm for each holiday that replaces the regular weekday psalms for the days of the week. And the psalm for Purim is Psalm 22, Chaf Bet. It's a very, very beautiful psalm, and we're going to do that next week after we finish these last two psukim, which I don't want to rush through because they have a very significant role, both here, but also as the introduction to Arvit every weekday. Again, thank you all very, very much for joining this morning. Everyone should have a Shavua Tov, and I look forward to seeing you next week as well.